Here.
Councilwoman Gussie. Here. Councilmember Manfredi.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Vitiello.
Here.
Vice Mayor Wade.
Here.
Mayor Price.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. That'll take us to item 3.1. We're going to review items on the regular city council meeting agenda. Council, any questions on the items at this time? Anything to discuss? Okay, seeing nothing, we'll go ahead and move past that one and move on to 3.2. The mayor and city council shall hear reports on meetings and/or conferences attended by the council. Council, time is yours. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Wow, it was a crazy January, at least for me. So I'll just start out with January 21st at Copper Sky, where I went to the Martin Luther King celebration and saw some wonderful celebrations, some wonderful community interaction and recognition took place, and it was a delightful event, and I'm sure many of you might have gone as well, but it was very, very nicely received. On January 24th, I attended the Pinal Partnership meeting where we were given an update on Pinal County from each of the supervisors, and each of them gave sort of a summary from their district, and of course, our supervisors spoke about some of the work they're doing here in the city to build some services and complexes from the county's perspective, and then they talked about all of the wonderful things that are happening between here and Casa Grande in regards to jobs, and so we all hope that some of those actually fruition into the 2,000, 4,000 jobs that they're actually anticipating. Also on January 24th, I attended the small business training through the Power Networking Group, which I found to be very interesting. It was my first interaction with the Power Networking Group here in Maricopa. But basically, that group takes any small business manager, owner that wants to learn about how to better operate their small business, and they provide free training, free interaction and networking opportunities. And in this particular case, we learned a lot about how to raise the level of awareness of your business through social media. So I would recommend small businesses get involved, at least take a look at it, see what they have to offer in regards to training and opportunities to learn what it takes to improve your business here in the city of Maricopa. I attended the January 25th game night at Copper Sky, which was well attended as usual, but what was really cool is they were able to announce some additional services for seniors on Tuesday 1 to 4 and Friday 9 to noon, Monday through Friday. Room A at Copper Sky will be open for seniors, and they'll be providing programming for seniors of a variety of type. In fact, they just had their kickoff today. It was attended by 30 to 40 seniors for just being announced recently, and it's going to be a really exciting space. We also announced the creation of a once-a-month lunch and learn, and so the first lunch and learn will be held there February 15th on, let me see, what was it? Oh yeah, memory loss and how to prevent memory loss and dementia and doing things in your own home. So I welcome seniors to look into that. Let's see. Oh, the January 26th was the Senior Info Expo, where together with exhibitors, attendees, we had over 450 people, and anything you wanted to know. I don't even know what we would have been missing in regards to seniors and what kind of information they would like to have. We had 54 vendors and 14 workshops, 19 workshops, something like that. It was amazing and really well attended out at CAC. I don't want to take everybody's steam. I attended the MAP as well, MAP kickoff, where I was stunned. So MAP is Maricopa Advocate Program. I was stunned. I walked into this room and it was completely packed. So I hope we got good response, Denise, in terms of who wants to participate in that, because with that many people, knowing the real scoop about Maricopa and being able to spread that word will make amazing information shared amongst our community. So that was really, really fulfilling. And then, wow, if you want an eye-opener, I went to the Poetry Slam. That was an eye-opener. I don't know how else to describe that, but it was really a cool art event. And I probably heard about 30 or 40 different poems given by the poet. And they had a top 3 winners, and it was really a really magnificent art event for the city of Maricopa. And it was Arizona statewide, so people came from as far north as Flagstaff, and I'm not sure how far south, but they came from all across Arizona. So pretty cool that we had that here in Maricopa. And today I attended the MAG, Economic Development Committee meeting, and I took some notes, but not anything that I thought was real fruitful for the city of Maricopa. Otherwise, I'd share it with you. So that was my month. It was pretty crazy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Appreciate it. Yes, Councilmember Manfredi.
Yeah, I did some of that stuff too. Covered everything. I don't know. But yesterday I got to attend the CAG Legislative Day.
Okay, so now I got to add that.
And it was Central Arizona Government, so we got to talk a little bit about some of the stuff happening at the legislature that can impact us, whether it's digital goods and the taxation of it, and roads, of course. And $32 fee that you see on your car registration.
The tax
and now
rate.
that's probably not going anywhere, so stop hoping it's going anywhere. It's probably going to stay where it is. They might ramp it down a little bit, but it's going to be there. So it was good to hear all that and talk to the legislators. They were there, Brett Roberts and a bunch of others, and our state representatives, state senators. So it was pretty good. Other than that, all that other stuff. Too. Well, not all of it, some of it.
Councilmember Vitiello and then Vice Mayor Wade.
Well, Nancy gave you all the dates, and I thank her for that. Vince attended, I also attended the CAG meeting too, but I'd like to thank everybody who put together MLK, Henry and Gail, and I'm sure there was a whole crew of people, the city staff, everybody, whoever participated did a great job, and thank you. I attended both the dinner or the social evening, and then the afternoon on the Saturday, so thank you for everything that you put out on that, because I know that takes a lot of time. I also attended youth council. We did resumes. So they were able to come in and learn how to build their resume. So they had a teacher from the school come in, and the youth council, they had about 16 or 18 kids come in to learn how to build a resume. So I thought that was great, and I look forward to attending more youth council stuff. Game night again was a decent turnout, and it's getting bigger and bigger as the time goes on, and I'll be a part of the senior group, so I also want to thank them for that. Senior Expo was amazing. I mean, you can't say we had 350 people there. It was a great turnout at CAC. I want to thank former Vice Mayor Peg Chapados and Nancy for all the hard work they did, and I look forward to working with the seniors also, so I also thank them for all the hard work that they've put in. And of course, CAG yesterday that I attended with Vince and Mayor Price too. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, everybody, for explaining what we do this month. And ditto, yep, I was there, and it was good as well. But I just want to really, just for a moment, just on what Councilmember Vitiello mentioned about Martin Luther King. We had an event on the 19th of January and an event on the 21st of January. Both of those events, we recognized both youth in the community and adults in the community with a Dream Award. People who we call the unsung heroes. People you see, you know, but you probably had no idea they did all the things that they did. And so that was the main focus behind that, is to acknowledge and represent people who do a lot for the city and give them their due. I'll just mention one, that's Grace Gomez. Grace is a long-term resident of Maricopa. I don't think she was born here, but she's a long-term resident. Her family's here. And Grace, I didn't know that Grace was the first person to do basically shock with police and children. I didn't know that she was the first one of the originators of the Relay for Life. I didn't know some of the other things that she did until I got her resume. And it was people like that we wouldn't recognize. So I appreciate all the effort, all the time that was spent coming and participating. Thank you very much. I think it went well. And then the P&G, I had an opportunity to talk to the P&G group as well, tell them about the business registry. There were a number of businesses there that were concerned about kind of coming out of the shadows and coming into the main light with their businesses. They were concerned about taxation. They were concerned about fees. They were concerned about just being identified in some cases. So we were able to kind of allay their fears that we were going to be coming after them once they registered, and as a result of it, I see that the numbers are starting to pick up on the business registry, and so that's what we want. We want people to feel like they can come out and let us know about their business. And I have to give credit to City Manager Horston for pushing that effort forward. I think that's a great thing for businesses. And then finally, the Poetry Slam. As Councilmember Smith said, this place was rocking there on Saturday. And you had to kind of check some of your sensitivities at the door, because poetry is that way. And it was well done, very well put together by Judith and the Clute, the overseer of the poetry. And it's very nice to see people come out and feel comfortable enough to be able to share their poetry. I noticed one gentleman, I don't know if you noticed this or not, Tristan. One of his poems seemed to me to be, he was talking about real life. And he was expressing his self in a manner of having been in conflict, having been in a Vietnam, or I don't know if he was a Vietnam veteran or where a conflict he was in. But at the end of his performance, it took him about 3 or 4 minutes to gather himself. So that was significant to me, that he would come and share like that, even knowing what the impact was going to be on him personally. And that's what poetry is all about. So I asked Judith to kind of give us an insight on what that cost. It should have been more attended. We should have more people here to actually experience it. And hopefully between the 7 of us, we can encourage people that the arts is important, the Arts Council is important, having activities like that is important, and so we can continue on to support the community the best we can. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Appreciate it.
Councilwoman Gussie.
I was given instructions, all right, it works. Regarding the Poetry Slam, the winner of the Poetry Slam, we got them their first gig. They will be performing at the West Top Conference. This is a conference of educators, and they'll be coming to the Hyatt next week with 300 individuals from Hawaii, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, and California, educators. So that individual who won that, we got them their first gig. They'll be performing at that event. Also wanted to mention that Congressman O'Halloran was at our senior expo. I did have a conversation with him. We will follow up on the conversation that we had regarding a VA home and a VA clinic for Maricopa. Our veterans are lacking a lot of services, as we know, and we are in the works of hopefully getting the conversations moving so that we could get some proper service for our vets here in Maricopa.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yes, Councilor Video.
Also, I would like to thank Chief Leffler inviting me to his quarterly meetings, and I don't know if you might have seen on Facebook, I got to be 100 feet up in the air at a 90-degree angle, and it was a lot of fun being in the new ladder truck. So it was quite enjoyable to be out there and do that, and spend time with the firefighters and hear what their wants and needs are, and really get to know them. And they also said, hey guys and ladies, you're all invited any given time to go out and say hello. And that truck goes every day, goes up 100 feet at a 90-degree angle, and you're more than welcome at about 8 a.m. in the morning to go up top and look at the city. It's a beautiful place to watch it from. So anyway, thank you, Chief. I appreciate it.
Councilman Smith.
Yeah, sorry, just Councilmember Vitiello reminded me that acknowledging people is really very important. And for the Poetry Slam, art, regardless of whether it's written word, spoken word, music, theater, dance, is so important to the city of Maricopa. And I want to make it clear that it's so important that Councilmember Manfredi opened the doors, got everybody in, helped them get set up, really pretty much organized the event with the event leader. And then City Manager Horst attended as well. So it's important to City Council, it's important to our executive staff, and probably all the staff here at the city. So I just want to make that point because it's that important that those folks took a leadership role and participated the way they did. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Council. Anyone else? All right, seeing no one at this time, we'll move to item 3.3. The mayor and city council shall hear a presentation of the final report, Maricopa Transit Study by Wilson and Company, who is the consultant for this project. David.
It's our pleasure to have Wilson and Company back with us again. As you know, we've spent the last year, all of 2018, conducting two studies. The first up on the agenda here is the transit study. And this is a $75,000 study that came at no cost to the city of Maricopa. $60,000 was provided by MAG through ADOT in the form of Section 5311 planning funds, and the additional $15,000 was staff work here in Maricopa. The study set out with two objectives. One was an analysis of internal transit demand, and the second was an analysis of potential commuter demand between Maricopa and the Phoenix metro area and or West Central Pinal out toward Casa Grande and beyond. The final report is intended to be submitted on February 19th for council approval. And with that, I'd like to introduce Amy Moran, Wilson and Company. And it is my pleasure to inform council that Wilson and Company was selected by a 5-agency selection committee to conduct our SR 347 corridor study. And so after 4 years of work with them already, we're pleased to have them on board. And with that, here's Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you, David, Mayor Price, members of the council. I will just say it's a pleasure again, and I really truly am looking forward and so excited to, on that side note, have been selected for the 347 corridor study. So we look forward to working with you all a little bit longer. Moving on the transit demand study. Basically, just going to quickly remind you, I know we were out here once. I think we talked at the beginning of the study a little bit about what our purpose and process was. We'll talk today about some of our initial findings and really what this means in terms of next steps for the city. Basically, as David mentioned, we were really focused in this particular effort to look at, one, what potential enhancements could be made to the existing services that are in place to respond not only to existing demand but future demand as well. And then really to look beyond that to regional connectivity needs or commuter services and try to gauge what the level of demand might be. I'm sure many of you are aware that there was a similar service in place years ago. It's since suspended. And so we wanted to take another look at that and see if, does the timing seem right to start discussing that as a potential option again. From a process standpoint, really, we just looked at what is currently in place here locally, what sort of gaps might there be. Again, we looked at not only what's required today, what maybe is in demand today, but also what could we anticipate in terms of future marketing condition, recognizing that these things take time to evolve, right? And so we want to make sure that we're addressing not only the current needs, but what could be required in the future and how that system could potentially evolve. And then, of course, looking at what opportunities would be available. And then really at a very, very planning level, what could this potentially relate to in terms of cost? I think one of the great things we did here, we saw some excellent response to a survey that went out to your residents. And we got just shy of 470 people that provided us some input on what they saw as the needs related to transit. Actually, 11% of the respondents are currently using transit 3 or more days each week, so that was great to hear. What we did hear resoundingly from 60%, over 60% of the respondents, was that more transit service was needed. 40% of the people specifically stated service to new areas, 35% a desire for local service to have increased frequency, for example, or additional stops. In addition to the standardized questions, there was about 260 people almost who provided additional open-ended comments. And I know that the document was posted, I believe, for your all review, and we do have all those responses detailed in a rather lengthy appendices to that document. But I think one of the key takeaways from those responses was that over 40 people specifically cited a desire for increased service to Chandler. Again, about 40 people, service to Phoenix. About 25 people saying that they'd like to see increased regular service to Casa Grande, and then we had also a handful of people, about 15 people, saying that they'd like to see service to the Tempe area. So that's what the residents are telling us. That's what they're saying. We wanted to do a gut check in terms of what the data is actually telling us. So we engaged the MAG travel demand model, and we looked at the data that looks at the socioeconomic characteristics. It's based on some ridership information. And we said, all right, what is the model telling us about where Maricopa residents really are going? And we looked at that, as I mentioned again, for these various market areas that are highlighted in different colors. And we looked at it not only for existing conditions today, 2018, but also a longer range forecast through year 2040 to see what we might anticipate for needs. And what we found was that the existing model is telling us that there's really an increased or a high demand, the highest level of demand for the Chandler area. So Intel, for example. We also saw pretty significant to Tempe, which would encompass the airport area, Ahwatukee in the South Phoenix region, and then Casa Grande. Similarly, the 2040 model actually showed us demand to those same 4 areas, but what was really interesting was the shift. As you look out into the future, that the travel to Casa Grande is going to become increasingly more important. So while they kind of fell in 4th place in terms of the existing demand areas, they moved up significantly to right behind the Chandler area as you look into the future. So what we did with that information was we've got the residents telling us they have a desire to go to these areas. That communication from the residents is supported by the data that's coming out of the MAG model. So we looked at a few options, just kind of laid some things out about the potential alternatives. So one of them was the Central Phoenix corridor, and that would be basically going from Maricopa up to the existing park and ride facility in the proximity of Pecos Road, where there would then be connection up to other transit services. We looked at what we were calling an East Valley connection, and that would basically go into somewhere around the Chandler Fashion Center Transit Center that's there. Tempe Airport, this would be an entirely new route. So the interesting thing about those first 2 routes that I mentioned was that they essentially would be tying in or piggybacking off of existing Valley Metro routes, whereas a Tempe Airport would be an entirely new route on its own. We wouldn't be linking up to anything already in place with Valley Metro. And then we had the Chandler route deviation and the Casa Grande route deviation, which essentially is their services in place today, 1 day a week that go to those areas. And we looked at, what would happen if we were to increase the frequency or make that a more regular service. And so we analyzed each of those conceptual alternatives on a number of factors, both existing potential ridership, future potential ridership, of course, operating and capital costs, ease of implementation, again pointing to whether or not this is something that's already in place. The ones that are Chandler and Casa Grande, the route deviations, then it would just take those services and increase the frequency in days of the week versus the Maricopa Tempe Airport one, which would be an entirely new line. We also looked at the markets served. So what type of access was it providing to employment, to healthcare, to shopping, malls perhaps. And then we took an overall look at it and we said, well, where are we landing on all this? And what we did see was that really the best alternative in terms of maybe trying to think about starting up a commuter service would be to something that would go to the East Valley area. And I think that's important because that actually is a little bit different than what was in the past, which was really focused on providing service more toward downtown Phoenix and central Phoenix. So we're seeing now that there's a much higher demand actually in this Chandler area. Basically what we found, and I mentioned that we did some look at planning level costs. It's about $250,000 at a planning level to operate that annually, and that doesn't even include the cost for the capital vehicles, the buses. And that could range anywhere from $200,000 to $500,000 depending on the type of bus and the number of passengers that it can carry. And so one of the things that we discussed and one of the recommendations that we have out of this is that there really needs to be maybe a deeper look at the cost per user trade-offs. What's that benefit cost in terms of making that type of investment? And we also recognize that there could, of course, be challenges. You can offer a service, but those buses, as many of you know, are going to be confronted with the same challenges that regular car users have as they go through the SR 347 corridor. And so specifically, as David mentioned, we have been selected to work with, I guess it's 5 or 6 different agencies on MAG's 347 corridor study. And so one of the things that we'll be looking there not only are opportunities to increase throughput for regular passenger vehicles, but also are there some alternatives that would help the ingress and egress of these transit vehicles as well. So things such as, could we potentially consider a high occupancy vehicle lane? Could we consider shoulder running for transit vehicles? Things like that. So we'll be looking at those to see what types of capacity we might be able to provide for transit service in the future in the context of that study. Turning to sort of our recommendations about the local service. Our initial recommendations focused on providing weekday service from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and increasing that service frequency to every 30 minutes. We also looked at opportunities for additional stops, some, for example, potentially outside of larger residential areas, where right now we're really focused on destinations, maybe trying to look at where there could be demand for people who are starting their trip, for people who are at their home base. And then also to continue to install the shelters at all stops, and you've made some great strides thus far in this past year in getting some of those installed. One of the other items of feedback that we got was that it could be beneficial to rebrand the services, what they're called. If you've been on the city website and you look at the information that's provided for transit, we thought that there might be a different way to name these so people would have a better understanding of what they were rather than calling them local demand or limited local demand. The residents really can't make that distinction, so maybe we just call it Maricopa demand response, even if the service hours are different on different days. Then we had, regional demand response Chandler, regional demand response Casa Grande, and just simplifying those so it's the Chandler demand response and Casa Grande. And then, of course, the limited route deviation service, which is essentially the local route that traverses the city in more or less a loop. Maybe renaming that Maricopa Circulator. So things to just make the whole program a little bit more user-friendly. Some of the other ones we said is it'd be great if we could develop a system map that would be available. Right now, it lists out quite specifically the times and locations of the stop, but some people are very graphically oriented. I know I am myself. So to have an actual system map, and I know that staff has been underway in getting to work on producing those. Also, the schedules and maps for all the routes, making those available. We talked about having them available not only on the website, but also to post them, take advantage of the new shelters that are being installed. From what I understand, there is a bulletin board, plexiglass, that would be a great location to be able to post those for people who are at those stops. And then lastly, really just recognizing that there's technology that's available. It would be great for the residents to know how many minutes is it going to be before the next bus arrives. So that type of information. In terms of next steps, as I mentioned, the city and the staff is currently working on getting some of those local recommendations in place, some of those maps. And then from the commuter implementation study, we did list out what the intent of that study would be, a follow-on study if the city so desired. But basically where we're leaving you at this point is demonstrating that there is demand for a regional service. Demonstrating that the greatest level of demand is really in that Chandler area. And then recognizing that, of course, there has to be more detail put to the paper in terms of the cost and benefits so that the city is able to weigh those costs and what it's going to take to fund those services and how that would translate to the number of users. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions.
Council questions? Councilmember Smith?
Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to suggest that I completely support the idea of rebranding. I have worked with David on the age-friendly committee, and boy, even I struggle with, okay, the name of that is route deviation, something, something. I completely support that. So I like that that's part of your suggestions. And I do like some of the suggestions in your local action plan that I think might be very doable. I do support that. I'd be interested in, knowing more, I guess, about adding to what we currently offer. I know I'm always a little conservative when it comes to that because I want to make sure that we're going to have enough people to support the additional service. And so that's very important to me for the added cost. So, but interesting information, and I appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, other questions, comments this time? I would just echo Councilmember Smith, like the renaming idea and also the idea of things like the technology, talking about arrival times, that kind of thing. I think it just makes it more user-friendly. So that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Christian.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Vidal.
Actually, I just wanted to ask, can this presentation, can it be emailed to us? Is that possible, or a hard copy?
I believe so. I don't see any reason why it couldn't be.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else this time? Okay.
Thank
you very
you.
much, Amy. Appreciate it. That takes us to item 3.4. We're going to hear a presentation of the final report, Phase 3 Access Management Study Area Transportation Plan by Wilson & Company, consultant for the project. City Manager Horst, but actually back to David.
Thank you, Mayor Price. Without violating any of the rules of the council meeting or of the work session, can I come back for one additional point from the transit study, please?
Sure.
And that is that, just to be real clear in regard to the commuter demand, we really need a lot more study before we even recommend committing to a large sum of money like
Yes.
Very
that.
good.
Because my worst fear would be to endanger the local service in doing so.
Very good.
Okay, great. The Phase 3 is a continuation of the Area Transportation Plan. As you recall, in Phase 1, we created, not me, myself, the project team created a transportation master plan for the first time ever in Maricopa and created a regional connectivity plan. Moving on to Phase 2, had several sub-elements, but the most important element was a study of the Val Vista Parkway corridor, and we haven't talked very much about that corridor. But as Casa Grande continues developing and Maricopa continues developing and our center of the city moves further southward, the Val Vista corridor is going to become increasingly important, particularly if we get the I-11 connection that we're hoping for, or West Pinal Freeway. With that said, the Phase 3 is where we're at now, and that's the study to be presented tonight. And it's a logical continuation of the Area Transportation Plan because the original Transportation Master Plan focused on arterials and collectors, but there was no way to connect those together. So Phase 3 was access management. What kind of spacing are we looking at between those collectors at the points with the arteries? And then not second to that, but just as important is the signalization that's required for that. So that's the purpose for the study. And with that, again, I'm turning it back over to Amy.
Thanks again, David. Mayor Price, a member of the council. I believe I've been here before to speak with you as well, but we'll just give a brief overview again on, as what David mentioned, our primary purpose and then the process that we followed before we came up essentially with our findings and documentations related to the guidance for access management. As David mentioned, the ATP in and of itself primarily focused on the location and needs of the higher capacity parkway and arterial facilities. And what we've embarked on this effort is really to determine what the appropriate connectivity of the collector or local street system might be for businesses and residents to gain access to those higher level arterial and parkway facilities. We want to make sure that that spacing, for example, is appropriate so that we're not going to be significantly decreasing the ability of those higher capacity facilities to serve the level of traffic that they're intended to serve. So of course, the frequency of access and the spacing of those access have a fairly significant impact on what the volume of traffic is that you can accommodate. The 347 corridor, just as an example, through town. You've got friction that's introduced every time you have even an unsignalized driveway, for example. Also, the number and frequency of spacing can certainly introduce additional conflict points, which then increases the potential for crashes, which of course then affect the mobility in the corridor. So in addition to that, we also want to look at traffic control. I'm sure most people would love to have a traffic signal, right, to have access. But really you need to be careful about the spacing of those. And so we wanted to take a little bit closer look at that as well. In order to do this, we really looked at the city and we kind of divided it up based on the level of existing development. We'll all agree that there are certain areas that are pretty well developed and that their access is more or less set at this point. And really wanting to focus on those areas that we know that there's going to still be some additional development occurring, and trying to determine what that level of trip activity might be of new development that's going to go in. So we have an idea about how many more vehicles are going to be trying to access these arterial and parkway facilities. And in doing that, then we can get a pretty good idea of, is it going to take 2 local roadways to get out of this area to the arterials? Is it going to take 8? Is it going to take 10? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to define the number of connection points that are going to be required to serve that development. And then lastly, we said, all right, we've got a pretty good idea what the volume of traffic is. We have a pretty good idea number of facilities that are probably going to be required to connect it. That combination of the traffic and the number of facilities, where would we think, based on national guidelines, we might anticipate the need for a traffic signal? So based on that volume of traffic on those local roadways interacting with the arterial roadways. What we found was that essentially that remaining development in the incorporated area, it can be adequately served by collector facilities with spacing of, it should be no greater than 1/4 mile. So in other words, if you had collector facilities where you would just have in between your arterial grid system no more than three collectors in between at the 1/4 and 1/2 mile, 3/4 mile spacing, that really should be more than enough, which is consistent with the overall citywide guidance. So we didn't really find any particular locations where we're saying, wow, this is area slated for so much traffic, so much development that we really don't think you're going to be able to accommodate that. There's going to definitely have to be some sort of variation from what our citywide guidance is. We also found that traffic signals really, you should be able to limit them to about a 1/2 mile spacing. There were a few exceptions, but really best case, we'd like to see traffic signal spacing contained at the 1/2 mile. So you've got the mile arterial grid, and then intermediately at 1/2 mile spacing for traffic signals. And for the most part, throughout the incorporated area, we found that really we should be able to accommodate the access and the traffic with that. And again, just a few exceptions, I guess I would say, to that, where we looked at and we recognized that there may be a need for something more frequent. But we have included this map in the document itself. It locates the existing or programmed signals, as well as where we think we're going to need those arterial or mile connections, and then the collector arterial, which would be the blue dots. And really what this is intended to do is to provide a starting point. As people come in and they want to develop, we want them to be able to look at the guidance that's provided in this document and do their best to design their developments to adhere to these access guidelines. Of course, we recognize that there's always going to be a desire perhaps to deviate from these, and that's why specifically the city requires that traffic impact analyses be done in conjunction with new developments. And one of the things that we've been speaking with staff about was perhaps a need to update some of those TIA guidelines from what is currently in place. There's a good opportunity to do that as the city is currently updating their design guidelines. And so that's sort of one of the outcomes or the follow-throughs of this effort as well. And then I think one of the other things that needs to be mentioned is that there are specific character areas throughout the community that we recognize may have a different need for connectivity. And so we've been supporting city staff, and I know Ryan's been out doing some work just to work a little bit more closely with some of those landowners in those character areas to really talk about how these access management guidelines would suggest that that area be developed and what they might desire to see as landholders that could perhaps be combined with these requirements to drive the best circulation system for those particular areas. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions again.
Council, questions? Nothing. I guess
Wow.
that makes a lot of sense. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And again, I suppose if you want to have this available as well, we could email it too.
Please.
Okay,
Perfect.
thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Council, the time is 6:46. I'm not sure if we have enough time to hit our executive session in time, so let's go ahead and move it to after the regular session. With that, we have a motion to adjourn this meeting and reconvene in 15 minutes. Council, motion? Motion, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Reconvene in 15. Thanks.